Be advised, possible exposure.
Tavares police said they're releasing this difficult footage of an officer who is now doing okay as a warning about how dangerous fentanyl can be.
They see the unimaginable every day. But even they weren't prepared for this. They are trained to face the worst humanity has to offer: armed criminals, violent offenders, hostage situations. But nothing could prepare them for this. Faces that are not human, shadows that move with intent, encounters that defy every law of nature they thought they understood. When routine patrols turn into inexplicable disappearances, when body cameras capture things no one should be able to see, seasoned officers are left questioning reality itself. Tonight, we peel back the curtain on the cases law enforcement cannot explain, the reports that vanish into silence, and the moments that haunt men and women sworn to protect and serve long after their badges are retired. Seen at 3 a.m., some cases do not need screaming or dramatic confrontations. Sometimes a single moment of seeing something wrong is enough to haunt a person for the rest of their life. This story took place around 3 in the morning in Jose C. Paz, Argentina. An off-duty police officer named Walter Leguizamon was driving home through empty streets after a long shift. The road was deserted, his headlights cutting through familiar patches of darkness he had driven through hundreds of times before. Then a four-legged figure appeared in the beam of his headlights. At first glance, it looked like a dog. Argentina has plenty of strays wandering the roads at night. Walter slowed down, preparing to maneuver around the animal. But as the distance closed between his vehicle and the figure, something felt fundamentally wrong. The proportions were off. The way it moved did not match any dog he had ever seen in his years of patrol. Walter later described that the closer he got, the less the thing resembled any animal he could identify. Its snout was unnaturally flat, pushed back against its skull in a way that seemed almost painful. Pale blotches covered its skin where fur should have been. And then he saw its face. Not an animal's face, something that carried twisted human-like features arranged in a configuration that sent ice through his veins. There is a detail in Walter's account that tells you everything about the psychology of encountering something impossible. He did not scream. He did not immediately floor the accelerator. He hesitated. His brain was desperately trying to process what his eyes were reporting, forcing the image into familiar categories. A werewolf, a mutated dog, a sick animal suffering from some unknown disease. The mind demands explanations. It cannot accept that something simply should not exist. But none of those explanations fit what Walter was seeing, and in that moment of hesitation, survival instinct finally defeated the need for rational explanation. Walter chose to drive away, fast, because some questions, if you take one more step closer to answering them, you may never get the chance to ask anything again. To this day, no one has confirmed what that creature was. No carcass was ever found. No similar sightings were reported in the following weeks. The thing on the road simply appeared, was witnessed by a trained police officer, and vanished back into whatever darkness had produced it. Sometimes the absence of an answer is what makes a story truly terrifying. Eyes behind the glass, police respond to break-ins regularly. It is routine work. Someone enters a property without permission, homeowners call for help. Officers arrive to assess the situation. The procedures are clear. The training is thorough. But in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, a late-night emergency call sent multiple officers into territory that no training could have prepared them for. The homeowners were panicked, barely coherent on the phone. They reported that something massive had broken into their house. Not someone, something. When officers arrived, they did not rush inside following standard procedure. Instead, they surrounded the house in tense silence. The reason for their hesitation was what the trapped residents had described over the phone. The intruder did not resemble any person or animal the dispatchers had ever heard described. It moved wrong. It sounded wrong. Everything about it was wrong. Then the silence of the standoff shattered. A piercing screech echoed through the night, a sound that one officer later described as nothing he had heard in 20 years on the force. Glass exploded outward from a window, and through that shattered frame, the body cameras briefly captured something that made hardened professionals freeze in place. A reptilian face. Not a reflection, not a shadow playing tricks in the darkness. a distinct form with features that belonged on no creature native to Louisiana or anywhere else on Earth. What strikes me about this case is the reaction of the officers present. These were men trained to deal with guns, knives, attackers of every description. They had protocols for armed standoffs, hostage situations, active shooters. But when faced with something that had no name in any category they had been trained to recognize, they hesitated. They exchanged uncertain glances. Then they continued their duty on instinct alone, because that is what officers do. They moved forward even when every instinct screamed at them to run. The homeowners were rescued safely. The creature, whatever it was reportedly contained. But everything after that fell into institutional silence. No detailed report was ever released. No footage was made available to the public or the press. No official statement explained what multiple officers had witnessed that night. And that silence raises questions that no one in authority seems willing to address. If this was simply a large animal, a python or an escaped exotic pet, why was the case treated with such secrecy? If there was nothing unusual about the incident, why did everything stop at the moment of resolution? Sometimes what is hidden is not what we see, but what we are never allowed to see afterward. The 911 call. There are emergency calls where within the first few seconds, you can hear that the caller is facing something beyond their control. The panic in the voice is different, the words come faster, or sometimes they barely come at all. On July 31st, 2021, a man driving through Pender County, North Carolina, made a 911 call that fits this pattern exactly. He was traveling on Highway 210 when he first noticed something on the roadside. His initial report was cautious, almost concerned. He thought he saw an injured person standing at the edge of the woods.
It was a crazy scene on the highway that at first looked like an out-of-control case of road rage.
Someone who might need help. He was doing what any decent person would do, calling to report a potential emergency. Then everything changed in an instant. His voice shifted from concern to pure, unfiltered terror. Something had jumped onto the bed of his moving pickup truck. I have listened to this call multiple times, and the most disturbing element is not the description of what he saw. It is the moment his voice breaks. You can hear the exact second when this man's understanding of reality fractures. He described the creature clinging to his truck as having pale, stretched skin pulled tight over an emaciated frame. Unnaturally long limbs that bent at angles human joints do not allow. A hollow face with no expression, no emotion, nothing that registered as alive in any way he could recognize. He was emphatic about one thing, repeating it over and over like a mantra to keep himself grounded. It is not human, not a costume, not an animal, it is not human. The truck accelerated. The creature eventually released its grip and disappeared back into the dark woods lining the highway. When the man had calmed down enough to stop his vehicle and assess the damage, he found deep scratch marks gouged into the metal of the truck bed. Parallel lines carved by something with enough strength to score through paint and into steel. Police inspected the area and the vehicle, but found nothing that matched the caller's account. No footprints in the soft earth, no broken branches indicating rapid movement through the forest. No evidence at all except those scratches. I keep returning to those marks in the metal. If this were a prank, where did they come from? If it were a hallucination brought on by fatigue or stress, how did the hallucination leave physical evidence? And if it was neither human nor any known animal, what exactly was standing on that roadside at night, waiting for a vehicle to pass close enough to reach? The entity in white. According to descriptions tied to body camera footage that has circulated in certain corners of the internet, this incident occurred around midnight in a remote rocky area on the outskirts of a small town. Local police had been responding to multiple calls about a woman in white appearing at night near trails and stone slopes. The reports were consistent enough to warrant investigation. An officer was dispatched to check the area. His body camera recorded the approach. His flashlight swept across large stones and damp ground. The terrain was difficult, uneven, the kind of landscape where a single misstep could mean a serious fall. While moving down a small slope, the officer lost his footing. He fell backward, his spine hitting the rocks hard enough to knock the wind from his lungs. The camera captured him trying to lift his head, one arm raised, perhaps calling for backup, perhaps simply reacting on instinct to the vulnerability of his position. What happened next occurred within seconds. A white figure appeared directly above him, not running from a distance, not approaching gradually, simply there as if it had been waiting for exactly this moment. The entity looked like a woman in a long white dress, pale skin that seemed to emit its own faint luminescence, long black hair hanging over her face and shoulders, obscuring whatever features lay beneath, and then it pressed down on him, its upper body tight against his chest, one arm forcing down on his neck and shoulder, pinning him against the rocky ground with strength that should not have been possible for a figure that appeared so slight and ethereal. The position lasted for several clear frames of footage. The officer was held nearly motionless, unable to break free despite his training and physical conditioning. He managed only to raise one hand, his mouth open in terror, his eyes locked onto the white face leaning inches from his own. There is no public footage showing what happened after those frames. What is known is that the area was restricted for a short time afterward. Reports of the white figure in that location suddenly stopped, and the officer involved reportedly took extended leave shortly after the incident. Some cases are disturbing because of what they describe. This one is disturbing because it has video, because somewhere that footage exists in its complete form, and because someone decided the public should never see how it ends. The Washington, D.C. creature. In the Navy Yard area of Washington, D.C., an ordinary night turned chaotic when multiple calls flooded emergency lines reporting a massive creature moving through a residential neighborhood. Witness descriptions were remarkably consistent: pale skin, a reptilian body structure, a long tail that dragged along the ground as it moved. Not human, not any familiar animal, something that did not belong in the nation's capital or anywhere else on Earth. Police sealed off the entire area quickly, which tells you immediately that they were taking the report seriously. But what sent chills through officers on the scene was the order that followed from higher authorities. No one was allowed to fire their weapons. This was not for public safety reasons or concern about collateral damage. The explicit instruction was that whatever this thing was, it needed to be captured alive for examination. That meant officers trained for armed threats were forced to stand and watch as something unknown moved through the streets in front of them. Guns holstered, protocols suspended, just observation and containment. Video captured what happened next. The creature, apparently aware that it was being surrounded, moved toward a tall pole, and then it climbed. Not scrambling or struggling like a person trying to escape. Smooth, controlled movement straight up the vertical surface, limbs working in coordination that suggested this was natural behavior for whatever it was. It was not panicking. It knew exactly what it was doing. It had likely done this before. Then, with every light and camera pointed upward, with dozens of witnesses watching, the creature vanished. The area remained locked down for hours afterward. Additional personnel arrived. Searches were conducted. But no official statement ever confirmed that the creature was captured. No explanation was offered for what multiple officers and civilians had witnessed. The incident simply disappeared into bureaucratic silence, filled with all the other things the public is apparently not meant to know. If this were a hoax, if this were a case of mass hysteria or misidentification, why was silence the official response? Why was the order given to capture rather than neutralize? And what kind of creature climbs a pole in the middle of a police operation like it has done so 1,000 times before? The cloth that stood. This incident occurred in the same Navy Yard area of Washington, D.C., directly in front of a coffee shop in what is normally a busy plaza, filled with outdoor seating. Police were called after multiple people reported a disturbing figure standing motionless in the middle of the square. The figure was completely covered by a large white cloth, not speaking, not moving, just standing there, while pedestrians gave it increasingly wide berth. 2 officers approached following standard procedures for a public disturbance. One stood directly in front of the covered shape, while the other held a notepad, preparing to document the encounter. What they saw was clearly human-sized. The cloth draped from head to ground with excess fabric pooling on the pavement. No wind disturbed it. No movement suggested breathing or shifting weight beneath. It simply stood there, an obvious presence that demanded investigation. The moment that makes this footage unforgettable happens next. One officer slowly gripped the edge of the cloth. No sudden movement, no joking around. The motion was careful and deliberate, the approach of a professional who was absolutely certain a person was hiding underneath, probably a homeless individual or someone engaged in performance art. He lifted the cloth. Nobody ran away. There was no person underneath. There was nothing underneath. The cloth collapsed onto the ground, completely flat, as if it had never covered anything at all. The two officers stood frozen, staring down at the pavement, then at each other. You can see them trying to process what just happened, trying to find an explanation that fits within their understanding of how reality works. The footage ends without resolution. No explanation was ever offered for what had been holding that cloth upright in a perfect human shape for long enough to attract multiple concerned calls to police. The forest, which forests at night are never friendly places. The darkness between trees hides sounds and shapes that the human mind automatically converts into threats. Officers who patrol rural areas learn to distinguish between genuine danger and the tricks that shadows play on tired eyes. But in Humboldt County, California, one patrol officer experienced something that no amount of experience could explain away. It began with a scream, not a cry for help or a shout of alarm, a sharp, drawn-out sound that echoed from deep within the woods, the kind of noise that stops you mid-step and makes you question whether you really want to know its source. The officer decided to investigate. Half an hour passed as he moved through dense trees, following the direction where the sound had originated. Then he saw it, a figure standing perfectly still among the trees, eyes that seemed to glow in the beam of his flashlight, a grey, twisted face that his report could only compare to a witch from folklore. Not a costume, no clothing visible, no sign of humanity in its posture or proportions. It was simply there, watching him with an intensity that made the air feel thick and wrong. The officer made a decision that probably saved his life. He maintained distance while keeping his body camera recording. He did not approach. He did not call out. He simply documented what he was seeing while slowly backing toward his vehicle. Then, without warning, the footage cuts. No climax, no scream, no dramatic confrontation, just a cold, abrupt end to the recording that has never been explained. The officer withdrew and called for backup. When additional units arrived and searched the area, they found nothing. The forest was empty, as if nothing had ever stood among those trees. No footprints, no broken branches, no evidence that anything living had occupied that space. The officer maintained that what he saw was real. His colleagues believed him, but no one could explain what the camera had captured or why the recording ended so suddenly at the worst possible moment. The vanishing officers. This case starts like countless others. A routine traffic stop on a quiet road. An officer approaches a vehicle, runs standard checks, prepares to issue a citation or a warning. But from the beginning, something about the driver made the officer uneasy. Not aggression, not obvious intoxication, something in the way he spoke. Slow, deliberate. Each word chosen with unusual care, as if he were translating from a language the officer would not understand. When asked for identification, the driver offered a warning instead. He told the officer that stopping him had been a mistake. Then he said something that no police training covers. "I am a vampire." No smile, no indication that this was humor or performance. A simple statement delivered as fact, as if he were announcing his profession or place of residence. The officer immediately called for backup. You can hear the shift in his voice on the radio. The controlled professional tone giving way to something closer to genuine alarm. Additional units were dispatched. The situation was being handled by the book. Everything should have resolved with the driver being detained for evaluation and the officers filing unusual incident reports. But when dispatch arrived to recover the body camera footage, the officers who had conducted the stop were gone. Not at the scene, not responding to radio calls, not at the station, simply gone. The vehicles were there. The suspect's car remained where it had been stopped. There were no signs of struggle, no indication of what had happened. Just incomplete footage that ends, without explanation, and two experienced officers who vanished without a trace. I am not claiming the driver was actually a vampire, but I cannot explain how fully equipped officers on active duty simply disappeared within minutes of a routine stop. When footage ends without official explanation, what lingers is not curiosity. It is a deep unease that stays long after you stop watching. Voices in the dark sound can be more disturbing than sight. What you hear triggers imagination in ways that visual confirmation sometimes cannot. 2 officers on night patrol were passing an old school when they heard something that made them stop their vehicle. Not metal clanging, not an animal's cry. An unidentified noise that prompted the instinctive question everyone asks in darkness. Is someone there? The body camera captured what they found: 2 small figures standing near the school gate, child-sized, motionless. They did not turn their heads as the patrol car's lights illuminated them. They did not run or hide or react in any way that children normally would when discovered somewhere they should not be in the middle of the night. They simply stood there, as if waiting for someone to come closer. What strikes me about this footage is the officers' reaction. They did not rush forward. They did not draw weapons. There was a very human hesitation in their movements, the instinctive feeling that something is wrong, even when you cannot articulate what. The sense that approaching would be a mistake, even though your rational mind insists that you are looking at children who might need help. As the officers began to close the distance, the 2 figures turned and ran straight into the schoolyard. Not toward the street, not toward houses where help might be found, into the darkness of the school grounds where they vanished completely. No sound of footsteps, no impact of feet on pavement, just sudden absence where presence had been seconds before. A local resident later told officers that they were not the first to see the figures. The children, according to local belief, were the spirits of 2 who had gone missing years before. They appeared at night near the school and they tried to lure people inside. Whether that story is true or superstition born from grief, one detail remains. The officers did not follow. Something stopped them at the threshold. Perhaps they sensed that some places are only meant to be observed from a distance. The files remain hidden, the footage is never released. The officers move on, but the encounters do not. They linger in memories, in unexplained marks, in shadows that refuse to obey reason. And tonight, somewhere out there, another patrol car will see something that cannot be categorized, something the training manuals never prepared them for. Every decision will matter. To investigate, to drive away, to report, or to pretend it never happened. How long could you face a reality that refuses to make sense? How far would you go to follow the truth, even when the truth is something no one else is allowed to see? Some questions have no answers, and some encounters leave marks that no official silence can erase. The story is far from over,